Welcome to this explainer. Today we're cracking open a rather dark anthology. We are going to examine three completely bizarre, historically documented stories. And I mean, these are events that actually happened. They left behind trails of physical evidence and official records, and yet they completely, absolutely defy logical explanation. It really makes you wonder. What actually happens when the undeniable facts of a case stand in direct opposition to everything we know about reality? Lean in close for this one, guys, because these cases, they're going to deeply unsettle you. They'll leave you questioning the very limits of human understanding. Okay, let's dive into this. Chapter 1, Nightmare on Crab Island. So the year is 1977. Picture four brothers sailing to a tiny, uninhabited patch of land in northeast Brazil called Crab Island. They're just there to harvest some lumber. Now, the locals claimed it was haunted, saying that if you went out there at night, you'd hear strange voices echoing from the dark forest or see inexplicable lights flashing right over the treetops. But as you do, the brothers completely ignored the rumors. Their day was entirely mundane. They arrived at high tide right around noon, chopped wood all afternoon, had dinner, and by 8 p.m., Apollinario poured water on their campfire to put it out. They waded out through the mud to their boat, intending to take a quick nap in the cabin until midnight, which is when the tide would roll back in and lift them up. But they overslept. When Apollinario woke up, the sky was already turning pink with the sunrise. They'd completely missed the tide and were stuck fast in the mud. He looked around the cabin and noticed his brothers Firmino and Jose were still sleeping, but his third brother, Adriano, was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the quiet morning air is just absolutely shattered by a deafening scream coming from right outside on the deck. Apollinario leaped up, ran outside, and what he saw literally paralyzed him with horror. His brother Alvariano was screaming, writhing in pain, and completely covered in severe burns. It looked as though his very skin had been set on fire. But here is the impossible part. His clothes were perfectly intact. They weren't singed at all. They didn't even smell of smoke. The fire had somehow only consumed his flesh, leaving his garments entirely untouched. While he's staring at this impossible sight, Apollinario hears this low, sickening moan coming from back inside the cabin. He rushes back in, pulls the blankets off his two sleeping brothers, and Firmino was in the exact same state. His skin was literally sloughing off his body from horrific, agonizing burns, yet the blankets and his clothes didn't have a single scorch mark on them. Beside him lay Jose. Now, Jose wasn't burned at all, but he was dead. When they finally managed to get off that island and rush to the hospital, Firmino was slipping in and out of consciousness. Right before he fell into a fatal coma, the doctors frantically asked him what happened. His dying memory was terrifyingly brief. He remembered looking out the tiny cabin window and seeing an inexplicable ball of fire just hovering there in the air. Now, you might be wondering, what did the police say? Well, during the investigation, logic completely collapsed. The police looked into this extensively, of course. They hypothesized that maybe, the brothers took drugs and hurt themselves, or perhaps a freak lightning strike bounced off the sand and into the boat, or maybe there was a violent fight between them. But the physical evidence found to support literally any of these theories? Zero. Absolutely zero. Nothing on the beach was burned, the boat wasn't struck, the clothes weren't singed. The surviving brothers made physical recoveries, but never, ever recovered their memories of that night. The case was closed with zero answers. But get this, the island wasn't finished. Exactly 9 years later, in April 1986, a totally different crew of four men went to Crab Island. They reported hearing a loud crashing sound out in the woods. Then they all blacked out. 18 hours later, they woke up. One man was dead, another was inexplicably covered in identical, horrifying burns. And just like the brothers, they had absolutely no memory of what happened. All right, Chapter 2, The Phantom Stinger Flight. Let's take a look at the incredible life of Dee Slayton. A fearless World War II combat pilot and original NASA astronaut, Dee was lying in his Texas home on June 12, 1993, terminally ill with a brain tumor. He was weak, his balance was completely gone, and he knew his life was rapidly slipping away. But Dee, he possessed this fiery, unbreakable spirit. His true passion in retirement was flying a loud, bright red racing plane known as a Stinger. As he lay there that night, feeling his body failing him, an overwhelming, obsessive desire took hold. He made a vow to himself, essentially saying, "Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, whether I am sick or not, I am taking my Stinger out of storage and I'm going for a ride." He just wanted to be back in the sky one last time. So, early the very next morning, over 1,500 miles away in Southern California, the manager of John Wayne Airport was having a really stressful start to his day. Even before the strict 8 a.m. Sunday noise curfew lifted, his phone just started ringing off the hook. Furious residents were calling in to complain about a massive disturbance up in the sky. A plane was flying super low, doing wild, reckless aerial maneuvers and making an incredible racket. Multiple callers gave the exact same description. It was a loud, small, red, racing stinger. And a few of those residents even managed to catch the identification number right on the tail, N21X. The airport manager looked at the number and was completely shocked to see it registered to the legendary D. Sleeton. Computer noise data actually corroborated dozens of eyewitnesses seeing a red stinger roaring over California. And this brilliantly illustrates the impossible nature of this case. Because here's the undeniable fact. Dee's actual stinger had been donated to a museum in Nevada 3 whole years prior. It was literally hanging from the rafters, and it had no engine. As if the haunting roar of an engineless plane wasn't chilling enough, the final piece of this puzzle is represented by the number 5. 5. That is the exact number of hours that Dee Sleeton had been dead before that phantom flight even began. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep back in Texas, 5 hours before the California skies were torn open by the sound of his favorite plane. Chapter 3. A horrifying, vivid premonition. Picture this. It's a completely normal morning in June 1972 at the Alameda Hospital in California, when suddenly Harold Michaels, a hospital administrator, comes sprinting frantically down the hallway. I mean, he's totally out of breath, nearly knocking over medical equipment as he bursts through the doors of the staff cafeteria, demanding everyone just stop what they are doing. The room goes dead silent. There hasn't been a natural disaster, there is no emergency, but Harold, looking panicked and completely serious, shouts this entirely unprompted demand: the hospital needs to update its disaster plan. He actually forced the bewildered staff to drop their breakfasts and immediately begin restructuring their mass casualty protocols from the ground up just to ensure they could handle a massive, catastrophic influx of patients. For 8 long months, Harold relentlessly pushed his staff, running drill after drill and finalizing the new plan. And then, the terrifying wail of hospital sirens became all too real. On February 7, 1973, exactly 1 day after the staff had been briefed on the final version of Harold's new disaster plan, a horrific tragedy struck the city. A Navy jet literally smashed directly into a 4-story apartment building right in their jurisdiction. The disaster hit incredibly hard. The hospital's phone lines completely severed, meaning they couldn't call anyone in for backup. But as it turns out, they didn't need to. Because of those intensive new protocols, over 100 off-duty staff members heard the news and just rushed to the hospital unprompted. When Harold arrived, he found 6 full surgical teams already scrubbed in and standing by. As bleeding, critically burned patients poured through the doors, the staff handled the catastrophe with eerie, perfect precision. So, the crucial point is understanding exactly why Harold barged into that cafeteria 8 months prior. The morning he demanded the new disaster plan, Harold had just woken up from the most intensely vivid, lucid dream of his entire life. He had a premonition. He dreamed with terrifying clarity that a plane was going to crash into the middle of their city, bringing hundreds of dying and horribly injured people to their doors. He forced the drill entirely based on that horrifying vision. And the results of him actually trusting that inexplicable vision, they are absolutely astounding. At the crash scene, first responders initially predicted that at least 50 people would lose their lives in the inferno. But because Harold's hospital was unnaturally prepared, operating flawlessly under the plan he forced upon them, only 11 people actually died. Dozens of lives were saved, all because of a dream. These 3 events share a really unsettling thread: an invisible fire that burned flesh but spared cloth, and left absolutely no evidence behind. A phantom racing plane roaring over the California coast, while its actual engine sat hundreds of miles away, piloted by a man who had already been dead for 5 hours. And a man who looked 8 months into the future to see a catastrophe, acting just in time to save dozens of lives. These aren't urban legends, folks. These are documented histories. When official investigations, radar data, and hospital records collide directly with ghosts, premonitions, and invisible fire, well, we're left totally in the dark. It forces us to ask a really heavy question: where exactly do we draw the line between reality and the impossible? And perhaps even more frighteningly, what happens when that line simply disappears? Thank you for exploring these mysteries with me in this explainer. Keep your eyes open and always question everything.
Hit the bell icon. Subscribe the Midnight Files for more thriller and mysterious things.